Did you ever notice how the people who claim to love you the most can sometimes be the ones who steal your sleep at night? How a single phone call from certain family members can leave you exhausted for days? Or how Sunday dinner with relatives who share your blood can feel heavier than carrying stones uphill? There's something profoundly unsettling about this reality, especially when you've reached an age where you believed family would be your greatest comfort. Yet here you are, perhaps 70 or 75 or 80 years old, realizing that some of the people at your holiday table are quietly draining the very life force you've worked so hard to preserve. This isn't about being ungrateful or cold-hearted. This is about survival. After decades of putting others first, of swallowing your feelings to keep the peace, of answering every call and attending every gathering even when your body begged you to stay home, you've earned the right to ask a question that might have seemed selfish when you were younger. Who actually deserves access to my remaining years? Because time is no longer infinite. Energy is no longer boundless. And peace, that precious commodity you once took for granted, has become as essential to your well-being as the medication sitting on your nightstand. Something shifts after 70. The fog of obligation begins to lift, and suddenly you can see clearly who brings light into your days and who casts shadows. You start valuing a quiet afternoon more than a noisy gathering. You'd rather spend time alone with your thoughts than surrounded by people who leave you feeling hollow. This isn't depression or antisocial behavior. This is wisdom arriving right on schedule, telling you that protecting your emotional space is not selfishness, but rather the most important form of self-care you can practice in your later years. The truth is that certain relatives, despite sharing your history and your name, have been slowly eroding your peace for years, maybe even decades. You've tolerated it because that's what family does, right? You endure, you forgive, you show up. But what if endurance has been costing you more than you realized? What if the stress from these relationships has been contributing to your high blood pressure, your sleepless nights, your constant fatigue, your diminished joy? What if cutting certain people loose could actually extend your life and dramatically improve its quality? Let me introduce you to 6 types of relatives who belong at the edges of your life, not at its center. These are the people who, despite their protests of love and their claims of concern, are actually toxic to your well-being in ways that become dangerous as you age. Recognizing them is the first step toward reclaiming your peace. First, there's the constant critic. You know this person well. They've been refining their craft for years, offering unsolicited advice about everything from how you manage your diabetes to why you should or shouldn't have sold the house. They comment on your weight, your wrinkles, your forgetfulness, always with that particular tone that sounds like concern but cuts like judgment. When you were younger, you could brush off these comments, laugh them away, or argue back with enough energy to defend yourself. But now, at 75 or 80, each criticism lands differently. It sits heavier, it lingers longer, it makes you question decisions you felt confident about just moments before. The constant critic operates from a place of needing control. Your choices, your independence, your refusal to live according to their blueprint threatens something in them. So they chip away at your confidence, one comment at a time, disguising their attacks as love and worry. They tell you they're only saying these things because they care, which makes you feel guilty for being hurt. After all, how can you be angry at someone who claims to have your best interests at heart? But here's what you need to understand. Their criticism isn't about helping you. It's about feeding something broken in them, and you don't have to be the meal. Robert was 78 when he finally stopped visiting his sister after 40 years of listening to her commentary about his weight, his retirement choices, his perfectly reasonable decision to live in a smaller apartment. The relief he felt was immediate and profound. His sleep improved within a week. His appetite returned. The knot of tension he'd carried in his chest for decades simply dissolved. He hadn't realized how much energy he'd been spending bracing himself for her next attack until he no longer had to. The critic's power exists only in your reaction. When you stop defending yourself, stop explaining your choices, stop trying to gain their approval, they lose their grip. Silence is a shield that deflects their arrows better than any argument ever could. You don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them access to your decisions. You definitely don't owe them the right to diminish your peace during these precious years. Next comes the financial leech, and this one is particularly insidious because their requests often begin small and reasonable. They need help with a bill, their car broke down, they're between jobs and just need a little bridge to get through the month. Your generosity, which is real and beautiful, becomes their target. What starts as helping family gradually transforms into an expectation, then a demand, then a pattern of manipulation that threatens your own financial security. At 70 or 80, your financial situation is not what it was at 40. You're living on a fixed income. Your savings need to last an unknown number of years. Every dollar spent is a dollar you might desperately need for medical care, home repairs, or simply maintaining your independence. Yet the financial leech makes you feel cruel for saying no. They remind you of family loyalty. They paint pictures of their suffering. They imply that your refusal to help makes you heartless, selfish, unkind. Helen was 74 when she finally realized that her nephew's constant requests had depleted her savings to a dangerous level. She'd been saying yes for years, thousands of dollars vanishing into his perpetual crises, until the day she needed hearing aids and discovered she couldn't afford them. The clarity that arrived in that moment was devastating and liberating in equal measure. She started saying no. The nephew stopped calling, and Helen discovered that his love had been transactional all along. The sadness she felt was real, but so was the peace that replaced the constant anxiety about the next request. Your financial security is not negotiable. Protecting it is not selfishness. It's ensuring that you won't become a burden yourself, that you can afford your medications and your care, that you maintain the independence that dignity requires. When someone makes you feel guilty for protecting your survival, they're telling you everything you need to know about where their priorities lie, and those priorities clearly don't include your well-being. The third toxic relative is the guilt tripper, perhaps the most emotionally sophisticated manipulator in this collection. They don't yell or demand, they sigh. They reminisce about sacrifices they made for you. They mention seemingly casually how disappointed your late spouse would be in your current choices. They construct elaborate stories about family duty and loyalty, always positioning themselves as the righteous keeper of tradition while casting you as the one who's forgotten where you came from. Guilt is a powerful weapon, especially against people who have spent their lives trying to do right by others. The guilt tripper knows this. They've studied your soft spots, your regrets, your desire to be seen as good and loving. They press these buttons with the skill of a concert pianist, and before you know it, you're apologizing for things you didn't do wrong, explaining decisions that need no explanation, carrying shame that doesn't belong to you. Samuel was 81 when his daughter's repeated invocations of what his late wife would have wanted finally became too much to bear. She'd been dead for 5 years, and his daughter was using her memory like a cudgel, trying to control his choices about where to live, whom to see, how to spend his remaining time. The breakthrough came when Samuel realized something profound. His wife would have wanted him to be happy. She would have wanted him to have peace. She certainly wouldn't have wanted her memory weaponized to make him miserable. When he told his daughter this, she was stunned into silence. The guilt trip stopped, and in their absence, Samuel found space to actually grieve properly and to honor his wife's memory in ways that brought him comfort rather than pain. You don't owe anyone your emotional destruction. Not your children, not your siblings, not anyone. The people who truly love you want your happiness, not your obedience. They want your peace, not your guilt. Anyone trying to control you through shame is revealing that their agenda matters more to them than your well-being. And once you see that clearly, you can step back from their influence without apology. Fourth is the drama maker, the relative who turns every family gathering into a theater of conflict. They manufacture crises from minor disagreements. They spread gossip that pits family members against each other. They position themselves as perpetual victims while somehow always being at the center of whatever chaos is unfolding. Being around them is exhausting because you're constantly navigating their mood swings, managing their complaints, trying to avoid triggering their next meltdown. What the drama maker doesn't realize or doesn't care about is that emotional chaos has physical consequences, especially for older adults. The stress they create elevates your cortisol levels, raises your blood pressure, disrupts your sleep, weakens your immune system, and accelerates cognitive decline. Their drama is not just annoying, it's actually dangerous to your health. Every argument you witness or participate in, every tense phone call, every family event ruined by their theatrics takes a measurable toll on your body. Judith was 76 when she recognized that her sister's constant drama had been stealing her peace for decades. Family gatherings left her shaking and exhausted. Phone calls ended with headaches and anxiety. She dreaded holidays because she knew some manufactured conflict would erupt before dessert was served. The decision to create distance was agonizing because it meant accepting that her sister would cast her as the villain in yet another dramatic narrative. But within months, Judith's blood pressure dropped, her sleep improved, her chronic tension headaches nearly disappeared. The price of peace was her sister's approval, and she discovered that approval had never been worth what it was costing her. You cannot fix the drama maker. You cannot calm them or reason with them or love them into stability. The only thing you can do is protect yourself by limiting your exposure. This might mean skipping events where they'll be present. It might mean ending phone calls the moment drama begins. It might mean accepting that they'll tell stories about how you abandoned the family. Let them. Your health and your remaining years are worth more than their narrative. The fifth destructive relative is the emotional vampire, and this one is subtle because their toxicity is disguised as neediness rather than aggression. They call constantly not to check on you but to unload their problems. They dominate every conversation with their troubles, their complaints, their endless catastrophes. When you try to share something from your own life, they listen impatiently, waiting for their turn to redirect attention back to themselves. They drain you without ever drawing blood, leaving you exhausted after every interaction yet unable to pinpoint exactly why. The emotional vampire doesn't recognize that listening is a form of labor, that absorbing someone else's negativity requires energy, that compassion has limits. They mistake your willingness to listen for an infinite resource they can tap whenever they need relief. But you're not a therapist or a dumping ground. You're a person with your own emotional needs, your own struggles, your own limited reserves of energy. At 75 or 80, those reserves are smaller than they once were. You cannot afford to give them all away to someone who never reciprocates, who never asks how you're doing, who never notices when you're struggling because they're too absorbed in their own drama. Carol was 79 when she finally ended her daily phone calls with her niece. Those calls had become hour-long therapy sessions where Carol listened, supported, advised, and absorbed waves of complaint and crisis. She'd started screening calls because the sight of her niece's name on the phone filled her with dread. The guilt was crushing, but so was the exhaustion. When she finally set a boundary, limiting calls to once a week and capping them at 20 minutes, the niece's response told Carol everything. Anger, accusations of not caring, dramatic pronouncements about how alone she felt. The relationship was transactional. Carol had been a free therapist, not a cherished aunt. Accepting this hurt, but it also freed Carol to reclaim her energy and spend it on people who actually valued her as a person rather than as an emotional support service. Compassion requires boundaries. You can care about someone's struggles without absorbing their pain. You can wish them well without sacrificing your own well-being to be their constant emotional crutch. The emotional vampire will resist your boundaries fiercely because they work for them. But their convenience is not your responsibility, your mental health is. Finally, there's the pretender, perhaps the most insidious of all because they're the hardest to identify. The pretender appears kind and supportive in public. They say all the right things at family gatherings. They bring gifts and smile warmly and hug you with apparent affection. But in private, in subtle ways, they undermine you. They make backhanded compliments that leave you feeling worse instead of better. They express concern about your memory, your judgment, your capabilities in ways that slowly erode your confidence. They spread gentle doubts about you to other family members, poisoning relationships through whispered insinuations rather than open confrontation. The pretender's passive aggression is like carbon monoxide, invisible and deadly. You can't quite identify what's wrong, but you consistently feel worse after spending time with them. They make you doubt yourself. They make you question your perceptions. They operate with such subtlety that calling them out makes you look paranoid or oversensitive. This is intentional. They want the credit of appearing caring without the work of actually caring. They resent you for reasons they'd never admit openly, so they express that resentment through 1,000 tiny cuts. Frank was 82 when he finally trusted his gut about his cousin. Every interaction left him feeling uneasy, diminished, uncertain. The cousin's compliments always had thorns. You look good for your age, it's amazing you can still drive, I'm impressed you remembered that. Each statement appeared positive but carried the implication that Frank was declining, failing, becoming less. When Frank created distance, the cousin's mask slipped. The passive aggression became overt. The fake concern revealed itself as judgment and contempt. Frank realized he'd been tolerating someone who'd been quietly undermining him for years. Your intuition about people sharpens with age. When someone consistently makes you feel uncomfortable or drained, even if you can't articulate exactly why, trust that feeling. You don't need to build a legal case. You don't need to prove their toxicity to anyone else. You simply need to protect yourself by limiting their access to you. The pretender will likely object to this boundary by painting themselves as the victim of your unreasonable behavior. Let them. You're not responsible for managing their narrative. Here's the profound truth that connects all 6 of these toxic relatives. After 70, after 80, after decades of living, you've earned the right to be selfish with your peace. You've spent enough years attending to other people's needs, managing other people's feelings, prioritizing other people's comfort over your own. This final chapter of your life belongs to you. Not to the critic who diminishes you, not to the leech who exploits you, not to the guilt tripper who manipulates you, not to the drama maker who exhausts you, not to the emotional vampire who drains you, not to the pretender who undermines you. Family is supposed to be refuge, not battlefield. It's supposed to nourish you, not deplete you. And when it doesn't, when certain family members consistently leave you feeling worse rather than better, you have every right to create distance. This isn't cruelty. This isn't holding grudges. This is survival. This is recognizing that your remaining time is precious and choosing to spend it surrounded by people who add to your life rather than subtract from it. Some relationships are worth fighting for. Others are worth walking away from. The difference is clear when you ask yourself one simple question: does this person make my life better or worse? Do I feel lighter or heavier after spending time with them? Am I energized or exhausted? Do they celebrate my joys or diminish them? Do they support my struggles or exploit them? The answers will tell you everything you need to know. Creating boundaries with toxic relatives will be uncomfortable. They will object. They will accuse you of being cold, ungrateful, selfish. They will tell stories to other family members about how you've changed, how you've become difficult, how you're breaking the family apart. They will use guilt and obligation and tradition as weapons to try to force you back into compliance. Let them. Their discomfort with your boundaries is not your emergency. Their anger about your self-protection reveals that they valued their access to you more than your well-being. That's information, not tragedy. You might lose relationships when you set these boundaries. Some family members will choose sides. Some will cut contact rather than respect your limits. This will hurt. Grieve it if you need to. But also recognize that you're not losing relationships that were actually serving you. You're releasing obligations that were crushing you. You're making space for the people who actually deserve your time and energy, the ones who leave you feeling valued and supported and loved in ways that don't require you to diminish yourself. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. They'll listen when you explain what you need. They'll adjust their behavior rather than demanding you tolerate their toxicity. They'll prioritize your relationship over their ego. Those are the people worth keeping close. Those are the ones who belong at your table in your phone contacts in your final years. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Take inventory of your relationships. Think about the 6 types of toxic relatives we've discussed today. Identify who in your life fits these patterns. Then make a decision about what boundaries you need to set. Maybe it's limiting contact. Maybe it's ending phone calls when certain topics arise. Maybe it's skipping gatherings where specific people will be present. Maybe it's cutting contact entirely with someone who's been poisoning your peace for decades. Whatever the boundary is, set it clearly and hold it firmly. You don't owe anyone an explanation beyond this. I'm protecting my peace. I'm prioritizing my health. I'm choosing how to spend my remaining years. These are complete sentences. These are sufficient reasons. You don't need to justify yourself or argue your case or convince anyone that your boundaries are valid. They're valid because you need them. That's enough. Tell me in the comments which of these 6 types resonated with you most. Have you dealt with the constant critic, the financial leech, the guilt tripper, the drama maker, the emotional vampire, or the pretender? What boundary are you going to set this week to protect your peace? Sharing your story might give someone else the courage to set their own boundaries. We're building a community here of people who understand that protecting your well-being in your later years isn't selfishness but wisdom, and that family is defined not by shared blood but by shared love, respect, and genuine care.